Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 2-Meter Crew Anti-Net. My name's Nick, call signs KN6DAL, and I'll be tonight's coordinator. We'll give a shout out and a thanks to the W6VVR repeater and the Vacaville Radio Club. Also to the Freestar Network for the use of their repeaters and their digital connections, and the owners and operators of the WX5 NAS repeater system. And thanks to Mike, WG5EEK, Greg, W5GSW, and Brian, KK6BXP, for all the effort they put into keeping the network alive. And because we are on so many different repeaters and digital connections, we just want to take a second and see if there's any priority or emergency traffic. If there is at any point throughout the Anti-Net, you can say break break with your call sign and we'll clear the air for you. Is there any priority or emergency traffic at this time? All right, nothing was heard. The 2-Meter Crew, we're not an actual club. We're just a group of hams. We're learning and enjoying all things ham related. There's no charges, there's no fees to be a 2-Meter Crew member. If you're looking for more information, you can check our website out at 2metercrew.net. You can also join our Discord. There is links in the YouTube description to check those sites out. This is an open net. It's welcome for everybody. You're welcome to join in with questions, answers to questions. You're welcome to just tell us about your day, or if you have anything you want to add to the topics. And the 2-Meter Crew Anti-Net meets every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 3 a.m. UTC. And we are on the W6VVR repeater in Vacaville, California. We are also able to be connected through multiple digital links. There's Echolink at W6VVR-R. There's also Allstar Node 51094 and 512342. We are connected through DMR Talk Group 3174-117 and through YSF Reflector 50462. We are also linked up to Freestar tonight, and their All-Star links are 2195 and 2196. We are connected to the Mad Scientist Amateur Radio Club's repeater in San Mateo, California. And if you don't have a way to connect to a digital mode or through a repeater, you can always join our Zoom call, and we will post links in the chat on YouTube throughout the night for that. And the Anti-Net is also being live streamed here on YouTube at Northwest Ham Shack. If you like and subscribe, you can get notifications when we go live each week. All right, so before we get into tonight's topic, a couple of things. First, let's just see if we have anybody out there that is new or has never checked in with us before. If you have recently gotten your license or have recently upgraded, come on in now. All right, nothing being heard. We'll have a spot for check-ins here in a little bit if anybody wants to check in and say hi. But before we get into tonight's topic, I just wanted to take a second and give a shout-out and a thank you to Steve, KN6IZD. Steve sent me a gift in the mail, and it was super gracious. I really appreciate it. And if you're out there, Steve, thank you so much. We appreciate you watching the Anti-Net on YouTube, and look forward to you checking in with us. So huge thank you to you. That was not expected and much appreciated. Tonight's topic, we figured it would be fun to talk about HF propagation. So I'm going to pull up a screenshot for the people that are watching online, and if you give me just 1 second, I'm going to let this drop. All right, this is Nick, call signs KN6DAL with the 2 meter crew anti-net. And yeah, so tonight's topic I thought would be fun to talk about HF propagation, specifically the reports that we see that are kind of running around everywhere. And if you're anything like me, when I first started looking at these, and even sometimes now when I look at them, I don't totally understand all of what they're explaining here, right? If you're watching on YouTube, you can see on the screen that I've pulled up one of these, an active report as an example. And oftentimes you see where on a portion of it, it'll say the HF band conditions, and it'll say poor or fair or good, and that can be a good indicator to start off with. But before we dive into like what some of these numbers mean, one thing I want everybody to understand is, so all of this is related to sun activity. And the sun runs on an 11-year cycle. And during that cycle, the activity that the sun puts out, it decreases or increases depending on what part of the cycle that it's in. And these cycles have a direct influence on how propagation in HF band conditions work. And so as amateur radio operators, we want to monitor that to give us an idea what conditions look like and what they could potentially look like in the near future to give us an opportunity to get on the air. All right, so with sun cycles, one of the things that we're specifically looking at is sunspots. And as those cycles go up and down, you get more or less sunspots. And those sunspots produce energy, and they allow us to make many different types of measurements. And when we measure these different things that are happening with the sun, it can give us an indication of how good or bad the bands are going to be. So a propagation report or a propagation condition report is similar to like a weather report, but instead of giving you condition on temperature and wind and stuff like that, it's giving you information relatives to the sun's weather and how it'll affect radio signal propagation conditions here. Most reports use terms like SFI, SN, N, K, and A, excuse me. So we're going to go over some of those and kind of what those acronyms mean, and what they offer us as far as understanding. So for the first one that you typically see on the very upper left-hand corner of these reports is SFI index. And so what that stands for is solar flux index, and it's a gauge of how much solar particles and magnetic fields are reaching our atmosphere. In other words, this value informs us on solar winds that are reaching our planet and their influence on creating HF propagation conditions. For this measurement, the higher the number, the better the propagation is going to be. And the index value also suggests propagation on bands between 10 meters and 20 meters, and it's on a scale of 30 to 300. So a way that you can kind of look at that is, if it's below 70, the propagation on 10 meters, 12 meters, 15 meters, 17 meters, 20 meters, and such is probably going to be pretty poor. And if it's between 80 and 90, it's going to be somewhat low. Once you get into the 90 to 100, it tends to be average. And then if you start to see a SFI index of 100 to 150, that means propagation is going to trend towards good, and then anything above 150 is ideal. And this is Nick, call signs KN6DAL with the 2 meter crew anti-net. Moving forward on solar flux, so one thing to keep in mind is that this value has very little and honestly almost no influence on anything 30 meters and below. So 30, 40, 80, 60 for ham radio operators, that number is not gonna make as much of a difference. A value over 150 indicates ideal propagation, and people with small HF stations can begin to use things like not perfect antennas and stuff like that are still going to work much better once you achieve a value over 150. And one thing to keep in mind is that if you see that number is peaking over 150, you want to take advantage of that, because that could be something that is good for a very short period of time and then goes away. It could be when the sun sets. It could be the next day. But when you see those numbers starting to spike, you want to get on the air and take advantage of that. The next number that we typically look at is sunspots, and that's referred to as SN. This value is the visible number of spots that are on the sun. And traditionally, the higher the number, the better ionization of our atmosphere, which will help create HF propagation conditions. The range of sunspots can be from as low as nothing to as high as 250, and sometimes it can even be more than that. It's rare that we see it over 200, but if you do, that would be an ideal time to jump on the air and give it a shot. All right, so to dive a little bit more into sunspots, the sunspot number indicates if they're high, that there's a large amount of electromagnetic activity on the surface of the sun, and potentially that can turn in from a sunspot to a solar flare. But before they erupt into solar flares, they can create really good HF propagation. Once they turn into solar flares, they can absolutely wipe out HF propagation. So that typically happens kind of in the 18 to 25 day period after sunspots are formed. So that's where you can see a lot of different fluctuation from understanding these numbers a little bit better. All right, so if you see sunspot numbers over 100, you can expect good propagation conditions when the sun is facing us, when the sunspots are facing us, and the current solar maximum. It's all kind of a hobby. So these aren't going to be perfect, exact examples of what you can expect every single time, but it gives you a good kind of chart to go off of. During solar minimums, which means that there's low or no sunspots, you can see bad or no propagation conditions, and sometimes that can last for years at a time, or even until the next solar cycle. When these conditions occur, amateur radio operators often revert back to using those lower frequencies like 30, 40, 60, 80, and 160 meters because they aren't affected as much. And then always keep an eye out for when those numbers improve to give it a shot at the higher bands. Again, this is Nick. Call signs KN6DAL. I'm going to let this drop. All right, so moving on to the next number, we've got solar flux. So SFI and sunspots numbers need to be high, and they need to be sustained. So those two numbers that we just talked about, for them just to be high one day isn't enough. It's kind of a trend. So once they start to increase, especially when they're high for a sustained amount of days, like 5 to 7 days, that's what's going to significantly affect propagation on HF. The longer the numbers stay high, the better the propagation will become. So always watch these numbers over a period of days to see how they fluctuate. There has been stories of like during the 1950s where sunspot numbers were close to 250, and they offered amazing HF propagation. And you've probably heard Elmers out there talking about that, where they were able to make some really significant contacts on like super low power, even QRP as low as 1 to 10 watts, using an HF transceiver and like a modest antenna. So always pay attention to that, because you might have an opportunity to make that really rare long distance DX contact if all these numbers are behaving correctly. The next thing that is something that we look at is the A index. So it's just an index of geomagnetic activity derived from a scale averaged from the previous 24 hours of the K index reading. So this scale goes from 0 to 400, but it's typically never above 100, and it should be interpreted as follows. Between 1 and 5 are the best conditions on 10, 12, 15, 17, and 20. Between 6 and 9, it's going to be average conditions, and anything 10 and above would create poor conditions on those bands. All right, and then the K index, this is a gauge similar to the A index, but this is of geomagnetic activity relative to what would be assumed a quiet day. And a falling number means improving conditions and better propagation, particularly in northern latitudes where aurora activity can occur. And the scale is between 0 and 9. You never want to see a value above 8 because this indicates that our planet's going through a solar storm of significant intensity. So 0 to 1 for the K index would be good conditions on the higher bands, or the best, and then from 2 to 3 would be good, 4 to 5 would be average, and 5 to 9 is very bad. All right, this is Nick, call signs KN6DAL with the 2 meter crew anti-net, and we're moving on understanding HF propagation reports. Just a couple more left that we'll go over. One is X-ray. So you'll oftentimes see on this report a value placed just past X-ray, and that's a NOAA reported value from basically it's A0 to X 9.9. The intensity of hard X-rays hitting the Earth's ionosphere. This impacts primarily the D layer of HF. The letter indicates the order of magnitude of the X-ray, which is either A, B, C, M, or X, and A is the lowest. And then the number further defines the level of radiation, updated 8 times a day. So if you look at our active report today, right now our X-ray is at a C 1.1. And then the next value is a 304A. So this is a NOAA report, and the value starts from 0 and goes to an unknown value. And this is the relative strength of total solar radiation at a wavelength of 104 angstroms. And I don't know if I pronounced that right, but it is that's 30.4 nanometers. So a very small wavelength. And that's emitted primarily by ionized helium in the sun's atmosphere. 2 measures are available for this parameter. The ones that we typically see on our HF propagation report are using data from the SOHO satellite, and it's a system called the SEM instrument. And this value is responsible for about half of all the ionization of the F layer in the ionosphere. The 304A is loosely correlated to your solar flux index. So when you see those rise, they're typically going to rise together, and when they fall, they're going to fall together. All right, and so the next 2 that we're going to talk about are proton flux and electron flux. So these are both NOAA reports, and their values start at 0 to unknown. The abbreviation, it'll say PTN FLX or ELC FLX, and so the proton flux is basically just measuring the density of charged protons in solar wind, and the higher the number is, the more impact it's going to have on the ionosphere. It primarily affects the E layer of the ionosphere, and that's updated every hour. And then the electron flux is the density of charged electrons in solar wind. And so the higher the number, the more impact it's going to have on the ionosphere. Primarily impacts the E layer as well, and that's also updated hourly. So then we have the letter N. N is a NOAA reported value from 0 to 5, and when it's when it's less than 2, there's a high confidence in its measurement, and when it's lower than 2, there's a low confidence, and that is updated every hour. So there's many more things to look at on these reports, but that's just kind of a high level starting point of what you can look at, instead of just knowing, hey, is the band fair? Is the band good? Is the band poor? You can kind of look for yourself and maybe understand why a little bit. And if you're looking for more information on that, there's resources online that you can really dive into some of these subjects. But I just thought it would be fun for people to understand a little bit more about what we're looking at when we're trying to figure out what condition are the bands in. And if you don't know, or you don't have access to a report, you can always just get on the air and give it a shot, right? The worst that's going to happen is you're either not going to be heard or you're not going to hear somebody else. But sometimes it's nice to know why. So we're always looking for a reason to learn and a reason to grow. And that's all I have for that. So this is Nick, call signs KN6DAL, with the 2 Meter Crew Anti-Net. If anybody has any questions, comments, or just wants to check in, you can come on in now. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Connor. We haven't seen you on here in a little while, Connor. How you doing tonight?
I am doing good. This is Connor, Kilo 7, Charlie Bravo Lima. I've been doing all right, just been super busy.
For those of you that can see, Connor's actually just got a picture of his fish bowl, so maybe he left his fish in charge. So I'll pass it over to Dan. Dan, N6ETR, how you doing?
Hey, good evening, Nick and everyone. This is Dan, N6ETR. I enjoyed the presentation on solar flares, Nick. You've given me some great advice on what numbers to look out for, because it was all Greek to me before that. I don't have too much going on. I thought I'd kind of show what I typically like to work on my screen here, the Zoom screen. It's the Heathkit SB301. It's a receiver that I recently picked up at a swap meet on behalf of a friend of mine. Picked it up for me, and I've got it on a variable transformer here, because I'm trying to retain the original electrolytic capacitors. That's something I'd recommend if you're ever choosing whether or not to pick up an older HF rig and you're unsure if it's safe to just plug it in or not. You can always start with a variable transformer to try and salvage the electrolytic capacitors before you just go and blow them up. So anyway, that's all I've got. Really, just thought I'd kind of get this thing on the screen here. I'm listening to 40 meters now, so that's it. Back to you, Nick, N6ETR.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Nick, KN6DAL. I gotta apologize. When I was talking, my speaker turned off. So I would assume Connor was probably talking and I just stomped over him, but maybe he wasn't. I don't know.
I was talking.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
and the whole time I'm listening, I'm like, I don't hear anybody, and it was because my speaker was off. But I'll thank you, Dan, for sharing, and I'll pass it over to you, Connor. K7CBL from KN6DAL.
I mean, I already have my minute, so it's all good. Good job. Gotta love the dysfunction.
Yeah, if it's not broken, I'll break it. But
yeah, if it's not broken, it's not the anti-net.
Right. There was one night recently that it was, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, we couldn't get anything connected. It was like we couldn't get anything to work, and it was just like, whatever, we're just gonna go with it. But all right, this is Nick, KN6DAL. I will take another call out for check-ins. If I missed you because I didn't have my speaker turned on, I apologize. But let's see if we've got anybody out there on the air that wants to check in. Come on in now.
Quiet tonight. As soon as I say that, we get a pile up. I gotta make my fish more active for the stream.
Hey Nick, do you want to try again? I wonder if the repeater timed out.
No.
This is Nick, KN60AL with the 2 Meter Crew Anti-Net, looking for any and all check-ins. Come on in now. Did it work over the air? Okay. We were having a problem with Allstar not too long ago. But it looked on my end like it went over.
Reaching the repeater.
Oh, there was a rough copy out there. Try it again.
Okay, let's try one more time. I am downtown Sacramento. This is Kilo, November 6, Papa, Romeo, Delta.
All right, wherever you're at, stay right there because I heard you loud and clear. There was a little noise on the background, but I got downtown Sacramento, KN6, PRD. How are you tonight?
Doing pretty good. I just figured to check in real quick and say hi to you gentlemen. And yeah, no, that's it. We were just finishing up with dinner. And I got my HT with me, so I figured, hey, see what's on the radio.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you checking in. I don't know how much of our spiel you heard earlier. We were talking a little bit about HF propagation and kind of how to read the reports. Have you dove into any HF recently?
Yeah, you usually find me on the 40 meter band primarily because that's the only dipole I have been able to tune into. I have one cut up for 10, but it doesn't work that well. And I tried one for 60, and also does not work that well. But the 40 meter bands seem to work pretty well for some reason.
Hey, you know what? If it works, it works. You know, I started out being on 80 meters quite a bit, and then I sort of like I kind of migrated to 20 meters because of how far I can get with my setup, and I've made a lot more DX contacts on 20 meters than anything, and so I usually kind of plant there, and especially when I'm mobile, I try to stay on 20 meters to see how far I can get out. But yeah, whatever band works, right? That's why we've got a bunch of them. So super cool. I forgot your first name. If you could come back with your name.
Well, the name here is Alpha Lima Foxtrot, and yeah, no, I totally agree with you on whatever works, you know. My next band to try on is 20 meters, but rumor has it 10 meters is pretty good right now. I was listening to someone on the local net talking about being able to reach Australia on 10 meters, so that's probably something I try out.
You're the second person that's told me that tonight, so I am going to move the jumper and tune up 10 meters in my truck for the drives to work and back, because I don't think I've made but a couple of really small contacts on 10 meters ever, and I sort of started my the hobby at the low end of the solar cycle, so 10 meters was dead all the time. So you are the second person tonight that told me that, Alf, so thank you for that. Appreciate the check-in, man. This is Nick, KN6DAL, with the 2 Meter Crew Anti-Net. We're looking for any and all check-ins. Anybody that wants to check in, come on in now. All right, nothing being heard. We will take one last round of check-ins, but before we do, I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming out tonight and watching and hanging out with us. After the conclusion of the Anti-Net, we'll be hanging out on the Zoom chat for a little bit. So for those of you that are interested in joining that, you can. I'll post a link in the. Chat on YouTube, and you're welcome to join in and have a conversation with us. But let's take one last round and see if there's anybody else that wants to check in before we turn the repeaters back. Any last calls for check-ins? Come on in now. All right, nothing being heard. We're going to turn the repeaters and all the digital connections back to normal use. Appreciate the check-ins and appreciate everybody hanging out. Again, we'll be hanging out here on Zoom for a little bit, so those of you that want to join are welcome to, and we will say 7-3 until next week. We'll see y'all later. I think I need to get a fish, Dan.
I know. I'm a little envious of Connor's setup.
I know. I like it.
You like yeah, that's dope. His name's Dopey, not spelled the way you think. It's Dopy. And then my snail, which you barely can see him, I think. His name is Nail. Actually, you can't see him. His name is Nail, Nail.
Nail the snail.
Yeah.
Snail.
Yeah, so that's he's fun. He's also in this molting phase, so right now he's got like what looks to be a broken shell, but when you actually look at it, it's not broken. He's molting his shell, as that's what they do.
It's too bad I'm so my setup is in the garage, and I've got a leopard gecko, but I can't really regulate the temperature of his cage very well in the garage because it's, during the winter it gets so cold and during the summer it gets really warm, and so I got to keep him inside. But I suppose I could put a wireless camera on it.
Wise WYZE.
Yeah, I've got a couple of them.
So like what I did there's a custom firmware I'm running. So
you can run
it
on
allows for RTSP. Yeah. So it's kind of, if you're not familiar with how RTSP works, I mean, you use OBS, so you essentially just hook it up as an OBS camera. But yeah, you have to flash the custom firmware, which is literally put the file on the thing and then put the SD card into the camera, flash the firmware. It's cool. I mean, I have really good Wi-Fi, and you can kind of see the quality's meh. It's not the best, but it's also not the worst. Certainly not as good as when you look at it through the app. So I don't know. I just went with this camera because I share it with a buddy of mine, so he can see it, because I have his guinea pigs and he has my fish. So.
Nice.
So the whole thing with doing it that way though is that you can CCTV if you're gonna do like security recording, right? So you can record it on your computer and actually have a hard recording. Like on the Wise app, it's all just recorded to a cloud or your SD card.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
So
but the SD card fills up so fast.
So the SD card thing is weird. I'm not a fan for security for your home or business or whatever. I'm not a fan with wireless cameras. Wired is the way to go with that. Just because you get like much better real time if you're watching it. Like if I had that on Ethernet, that would be like a 1080p 60 FPS stream. But because it's on Wi-Fi, it doesn't look like that, which is unfortunate. But yeah, you totally could use these. And I have I won't talk about it too much because we're on YouTube, but I have done some tinkering around with the AI and tracking different things on cameras and have them set up outside. So they're pretty cool. They're a cheap camera, it's $35 and you can set them up. This is just an indoor camera, but
right.
I mean, I'm sure you could put it outside if you put it under an eave of your house or something like that. I'm sure
they make I have one outside, and they make a
waterproof one.
Yeah, it's a weatherproof like cover that goes over it, and it works really well.
I mean, these I would say are pretty weather resistant as they are right now. Like I was actually concerned that by like me doing water changes when I work on the tank or something that I'd splash water and the camera's broken. But the power cable actually has a silicone boot on it before it goes into the camera, and all the buttons are silicone, like perfect fit and everything like that. So I don't know. I mean, they're cool cameras. The only thing I don't like is I mean, not that I really care. I share it with one of my, really good friends, but I wish there was a way for me to disable the audio stream. That's the only thing I don't like.
So the custom firmware doesn't allow you to do that?
No, I'm sure if I were to try to edit that, if it was possible, I probably could like cut the audio completely, but you still can open up the Wise app and listen to the audio.
Right.
So
you could
yeah,
just take the camera apart and cut the speaker or the mic out of it.
Yeah, could do that too.
If you didn't want it.
But one thing with animals is you have to be careful what animal you use, or what settings you use with certain animals. Because, like, for example, fish apparently do not appreciate IR light, so you have to turn off the night mode on the cameras, because otherwise this guy will go crazy when the IR light's on, for the night mode, and he does not like it. No, I'm not gonna put him through that. He does not like. He will go hide behind the plants to stay away from the light. And apparently, because it's light, it bounces around in the water. So it's like no matter where he goes, he's dealing with it. So,
right.
I mean, yeah. And the water level's a little bit low too. And it's been a while since I've cleaned the tank, but that's why I have a snail in there. He keeps a lot of the algae down. So
Dan, you're on 40 meters right now?
Yeah, I am. I guess we're off the air, right?
We're on YouTube, but we're off air right now. Yeah, we're off any digital connection or anything.
Can you hear that?
No.
Yeah, barely. Zoom is cutting your audio because it's got the stupid noise cancellation thing that they do, which makes everybody's microphones sound like garbage. Yeah, I heard it there for a minute.
It's acting like an anti-Vox circuit. Yeah, well, 40s, I think I'm on 7.238 roughly, but that's coming in good. Yeah, this receiver, when I picked up this receiver, man, I basically brought it up on the variable transformer in the garage.
Me and Nick both did the same thing, just 7.238, flip over.
Good, you can tell me if I'm on frequency.
I gotta listen myself now.
7.238 is just off frequency.
Okay, well, yes.
We're on, what you're trying to listen to is on 7.239.
All right.
I hear him about, good God, this is confusing. You hear him better than I do, I think, Nick.
Also in northern Utah, southern Idaho, just as our valley is here. So it's a very unique place, yep. Quite a swing,
what I will say, Nick, is I'm happy I put up the NFED half-wave, because, so first of all, it performs like amazing, like night and day difference. So I know like it's not the best test, but if I switch over to it right now, that guy's gone for me. If I switch over to my fence line antenna, oh wow. But if I switch up to the NFED half-wave, the dude's coming in. Hold on, I gotta go back over to my spectrum. That guy's coming in right now. S9, solid S9. Switch over to the 84-foot wire, and he's coming in about S5, fluctuating.
Yeah.
But one thing I do love is that I have a resonant antenna now, which is amazing, because before I used to have to, I would tune up, right? Just to do an SWR check. I'd just give it, a 100-watt dead key. And, I would test it, and my SWR was, through the roof. But then I go to this NFED half-wave, and it's I haven't pressed the tune button since I installed it.
Nice.
Which is, super cool, because when I think about it, I'm eventually when I do put an amp on, I don't have to go get a stupid, kilowatt or 1.5 kilowatt antenna tuner.
Right. So, Dan, does that have you? Is there an S meter on that at all, or no?
No, there is, but it's giving me problems.
Okay.
Yeah, this is it's
So
it's a
let's
swing
move
needle.
to
That's cool.
let's move to an unused frequency.
Are you gonna transmit? 'Cause I don't have the
Yeah.
transmitter hooked up.
But you can receive, right?
Yeah.
7218 is clear. 7218 seems clear. I don't know. I could be wrong.
All right. This is Kilo November 6 Delta Alpha Lima. Is this frequency in use?
I got you right at the noise floor, Nick.
Huh?
Are you on
I've got Nick. Oh.
7218?
Yeah, it should be
Okay.
close.
I've got you right at the noise floor, Nick.
November 6 Echo Tango Romeo. November 6 Echo Tango Romeo. This is Kilo November 6 Delta Alpha Lima. Can you pick it up,
Hey, Nick.
Dan?
Oh, sorry.
I wish I had my amp working.
I heard
What's
something.
wrong?
Can you try it again?
November 6 Echo Tango Romeo. November 6 Echo Tango Romeo. This is Kilo November 6 Delta Alpha Lima. QSL.
You hear him? What is he like for you there, Dan?
Did you see his face? He's all excited.
I know,
It's
he's
awesome.
so excited.
I love it.
What was he coming in for you? No audio.
I have no audio from you, Dan.
All right. Yeah. No, I heard you good. I was a little off frequency, so you sounded low, but I can hear you through the static. I've got a vertical, so
Nice.
I'm fighting with noise
Yeah.
today.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I've got you right at the noise floor, which is unfortunate. I think every band we've tested that at, you've always been like right at the noise floor for me.
I'm so excited for you to get the transmitter all set up because you're going to be... How old? What year are those?
I haven't looked up the year, but I think they were made from like 64 to 66 or something like that.
So...
60 years old, I guess.
Jeez. Nick, what's wrong with your amp?
I can't wait for you to get on the air with those. That's cool. That's just like a flash in time. You know what? I don't know what's wrong with the amp, but I stopped using... So the only disadvantage of my system that I have set up right now is I cannot... How I have it set up right now, I just have my hand mic for my HF rig. So I couldn't... Like, if you wanted... Like, let's say I was talking to somebody on HF in Africa and you wanted to make a contact with them right now, I potentially could key you up over Zoom. You could talk and you could make a contact with that person, right?
Yeah.
Now you couldn't do that as part of a contest because that would not be acceptable in a contest, but in normal conversation I could key you into that conversation, no problem. But with my hand mic I can't do that. But the reason I switched is my audio was just garbage coming from a USB mic, and I don't know if that's part of the problem, but I think there's something wrong with the amplifier, because I'm getting no output. When I turn it on, I get no output on anything now, and I haven't opened it up since me and Dan looked at it, but there's just something going on with it I got to work through.
Well, what radio are you running now? Because are you still running your 991A?
Yes.
Okay. So wait, so what's wrong with the audio? Why are you back to the...
So if
the USB was bad.
Yeah, so if I plug my USB mic into the system and use my foot switch and everything, and I go and I listen to myself on like KFS on an SDR, I sound like trash coming through. But if I use
weird.
If I use the factory mic, I boom into it.
That's so weird because when we tested that initially, you
I know.
sounded great.
I know
Yeah.
there's something going on that software-wise feeding it through the computer that it doesn't like. And let's face it, Connor, there's not a whole lot of people that are doing that. Like it's a very, there's like a handful of people out there that are configuring their audio the way me, you, and there's a handful of people that have it, but it's not super common, so there's really nobody to ask when there's a problem with it. And,
Well, you always have me.
yeah. No, you work for a living now.
Well, so yeah.
You need to go back to high school.
I need to go back
I miss
to
you
I
being
need
a
to be
little
your
child.
free labor. No, so I did a test. So if you remember, I had the Blue Yeti microphone that used to hang down. That was a condenser, or that was that's a condenser mic, right?
Okay.
Hold on, I gotta remember the talk with Bob Heil about this. So that was a condenser mic.
Correct. Yeah.
And
a dynamic mic
it's-
is different.
yeah,
Most of these
yeah.
are all condenser mics.
So I'm using a dynamic now, and what I will say is, so I do a little bit of processing. So like I am that guy. I put a tiny little bit of reverb on my audio out to my radio, so like I can actually demonstrate the reverb that I do here. Hold on one second. So let me turn this up. So you can hear the reverb, right? A little bit?
No.
No? Okay, hold on.
I think I might have heard
Okay.
the fish slap its fin, though.
1, 2, 3. Can
Yeah,
you
I
hear the
heard it.
reverb
Yeah,
now? Yeah. So I do a little bit of that. Just a little bit for HF.
Oh, you're
on my
that
HF
guy?
output.
Why are you that guy?
Because so I'm actually putting a mod into my 7300. I'm actually interested in ESSP. I think it's really cool, but that's like also like hi-fi audio for HF. I think is really cool. The
Just don't
73
sound
I
like
don't-
that guy that's screaming at his mic from the other side of the room.
Oh, you mean
Like half of the people on
You-
HF.
yeah, you
That's
mean
what I
like this guy? The guy that's got a ton of reverb? Or like that guy? You
Yeah,
know?
you're that guy.
No, so the reverb, I don't know. I think it makes the mic sound a little bit better. But yeah, I got away from USB mics entirely. I'm done with it. I went to XLR. I have a really nice interface now. The one key thing about the 7300, and I don't know if the 991A has this, is just a single wire for audio and cat control and stuff like that. Just a single USB cable. And that's why I really like the 7300 for that, because I have cat control as well as transmit and receive audio just going through one cable, and I've never had any issues. The only issue, I take that back, I have had one issue, but I fix it instantly. My XLR cable from my mic to my radio, when I would key up when I first did it, just this terrible noise, right? It was RFIing the microphone, and then I just snapped a couple ferrites on each end, and I haven't had a problem since. With your setup, I remember we were doing like a transmit line and a receive line, so I could see how there's a few things that could get definitely weird with that, but
To be honest, I should
whatever boats
probably
your float.
own stock in the company that makes those little ferrite beads at this point.
I know, right? Like I buy so many of them. I think I bought like a bag of 1,000 of them.
I have them on everything. So I've been fighting this noise in my truck for my HF mobile setup, and I have taken the whole center console out and put a ferrite bead on
Oh my god!
every single wire, and I don't know what's going. It's the weirdest thing. So I'm gonna have to revisit it again, but I've got it probably 50% under control, but it can be obnoxious sometimes. And you know how it is when you have a problem. Until it's fixed 100%, you're just not happy. And so I can't just settle with it being what it is, you know. Like I was laughing because Kellen was walking me through his. He's got 706 in his truck, and
Jesus.
and when he gets on it, like if he floors the gas pedal, it just makes this horrendous noise. And I'm like, well, what do you do when you got to drive? He's like, I just talk in between accelerating. I love that guy,
Oh
man.
my
It's so
God.
funny.
You know what you got to try? I did this on our CB in the truck. We had really bad alternator noise, and they sell them at AutoZone. They're inline filters for your power leads. that run to the radio.
Okay.
And it completely got rid of the alternator whine. The only time I will hear it now is when I'm up at like 6,000 RPM.
Yeah.
That's the only time I hear it, but I never go that high anyways because it's a manual, so I just shift it lower. So I'm like, all right, if I'm talking on the CB and I'm like, oh, I got to talk to this guy, hold on, and I just shift before 6,000. I don't hear the alternator whine whatsoever.
And see, alternators are tricky though, because you can get so you're going to get noise into your HF transceiver on, or I mean, even this could even work on a VHF UHF radio too, but you're going to get noise two different ways. You're either going to get it through your power, like you just said, or you're going to get it through your antenna, and the same part could be causing an interference through both sides, right? So your alternator may not make any noise via like radiating RF that's causing an interference, but it could cause problems with power line. But same thing too, it might not be causing any power line noise, and you could be getting it all through your antenna, which is a much harder problem to fix because
just snap ferrites on your antenna.
Yeah, just all the way down, but
the ferrite ambassador, Nick KN6DAL.
So it is kind of approaching 9 o'clock, so I'm going to say goodbye to the people on YouTube. Again, just a shout out to Steve, KN6IZD. Thank you so much for the gift, and it definitely makes me feel good about what we do in the hobby and what we're doing here as far as just trying to, create an atmosphere for new people and for people that want to learn. Sometimes questions can be hard to ask, especially when you're in an environment where there's like, a ton of people that are super knowledgeable. We just like to have fun. So definitely appreciate the gift, and thank you so much for checking out the channel. And we will say 7-3 until next week. Everybody have a good night.